We are recording, Casey.
So this is the regular meeting of the Charter Commission's Government Structure Work Group for February 9th, 2021. And I believe this meeting will be convened by Co-Chair Abbott. And Commissioner Abbott, your microphone is muted right now, so you need to unmute yourself.
Perils of the 21st century. Good afternoon. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the Charter Commission's Government Structure Work Group. This meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021 due to the declared local health pandemic. For the record, my name is Greg Abbott. I am one of the co-chairs of the Charter Commission's Government Structure Work Group. I will now call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll so that we may verify the presence of a quorum.
Commissioner Ginder.
Present.
Commissioner Metke.
Present.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commission Chair Clegg.
Here.
Co-Chair Garcia.
Present.
And Co-Chair Abbott.
Present.
There are 6 members present.
I'm also present, Commissioner Cohen.
Yes, let the record reflect that we have a quorum. We will now proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's Legislative Information Management System, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. Commissioners, the agenda for today's meeting is before us. May I please have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So
Garcia, so moved. Second, Metke.
The agenda has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the agenda before the clerk calls the roll? Hearing none, would the clerk call the roll on the motion to adopt the agenda, please?
Commissioner Ginder.
Aye.
Commissioner Metke.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Aye.
Commission Chair Clegg.
Aye.
Co-Chair Abbott.
Aye.
Co-Chair Garcia.
Aye.
There are
That-
6 ayes.
That motion passes and the agenda is adopted. We have one item on the agenda tonight, which is the reviewing the draft language of the most recent amendment language, and with our guest Brian Melendez. Is Mr. Melendez in the meeting?
And Mr. Chair, I would remind the callers who are participating, so Mr. Melendez may be muted and would need to press *6 on his phone in order to unmute.
Have we got Mr. Melendez *6'd? Chair Clegg, do you know if Mr. Melendez is around?
I don't know if he's on the meeting. I talked to him recently and he was planning on it. I will try and reach him offline.
Okay. Well, let me take the opportunity to lay down a couple of ground rules, or more suggestions really than rules. As we get into the language here, I would prefer that discussions occur in the context of a motion so that we can kind of narrow the discussion to which language we're removing or proposing to remove and which language we're proposing to add. I feel like we could, a kind of a general grammatical free-for-all could occur unless we are careful to focus the discussion. So I think that's an important consideration. So if you've got some general comments, write me a note in the chat function or kind of buzz in. I do think we should probably take a few general comments here at the top, but I don't want to have an unfocused discussion about language. I think it would be a waste of our time to just have kind of a general English language review session. I would also remind everybody that we're going to have several of these drafting sessions. I think it's entirely possible, and I think even likely, that we'll have some motions to edit or change the language that we will hold over for subsequent drafting sessions. And I think that's we might have to go back and check with people to see about certain facts. I think we might all have to go back to our dictionaries and thesauruses. There's no urgency to decide any particular motion today, and I anticipate, frankly, that we're going to have an agenda for the next drafting session that will include motions that are made today that we have not yet voted on. So,
excuse me, Co-Chair Abbott.
Yes,
I did get an email from former Commissioner Melendez saying that he has logged on but is waiting to be admitted.
Okay. I don't see him waiting to be admitted in my list of participants. He might have logged on to the wrong meeting. That's happened to me before. Perhaps the technical folks can see if there's another government structure meeting he logged into.
Perhaps Chair Clegg, we can connect offline. I don't know the phone number for Mr. Melendez, so it's difficult for me to look on the phone numbers and see if perhaps he's already logged in. But oops, yeah, I see that he just showed up in the lobby, and I've
Just admitted.
Yep.
Just admitted. All right.
So I believe Mr. Melendez may be on the call with us now.
Mr. Melendez, welcome to the Government Structure Work Group. Thank you for your volunteer efforts, and we appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do you have any general comments about the draft that you put together before we get into the specific language? Go ahead.
I hadn't planned on saying anything. I mean, I can make a speech if you want, but since I didn't have much time to prepare, it'll be a long speech.
That's quite all right. As I was saying, I think the discussion, any discussions we have about the draft language should be in the form of a motion. And before we get into the motions, we should have maybe a little discussion generally. And Chair Clegg has raised his hand. Chair Clegg, go ahead.
Sorry, I was getting a jump thinking we were in motions, so I'll take my hand down and wait for that.
Okay.
I'd like to make a general comment, if I may. This is Commissioner Cohen.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you. We wouldn't be having a government structural review committee meeting unless there was a sense of a need for a general construction review of the responsibilities of the Charter Commission, the mayor, and the city council. In my opinion, at this time, such a change is really not needed. I don't object to giving the voters an opportunity to render a judgment on that, but my own judgment at this point is that we've managed to have a successful city under the guidance of mayors like Hubert Humphrey and Don Fraser and several more recent mayors as well, without any major structural changes. And I don't criticize the idea of going through this review and having these suggestions, but for my own part, my feeling is that the problems the city has so far as governance are concerned can be resolved by the election of the city officers rather than structural changes. And that is my general approach to what is taking place here in this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cohen. Is there any other general comments before we proceed to motions on specific language? Seeing none, I will recognize Chair Clegg, I believe, for the first motion.
Thank you. I was going to move to remove the section titled Executive Function, which is at section 7.1H1. Note that I would retain 7.1H2. We've had discussion about that in our conversations with council members and in our conversation with the mayor, and both groups agreed that that provision was not necessary. So I will make a motion to remove that provision.
Is there a second for that motion?
I second Garcia.
Okay. The motion's been moved and seconded. This is, of course, the provision which we have informally dubbed the prime directive. And I would concur with Chair Clegg. The meetings that we've had with current electeds and some of the other stakeholders, there's been very little support for this. And I do think it unnecessarily complicates, I think, what is a very simple structural change. So I guess this would count as a speech in favor of the motion. Is there any other debate on the motion to remove the prime directive? Commissioner Ginder.
What is the prime directive?
It's a provision that says that the city council, neither the city council nor any individual council may usurp, invade, or interfere with the mayor's direction or supervision of the administration of the government. And there's more language there, but it also makes a violation of the section of misdemeanor, upon conviction of which a council member would be removed from office. It's taken directly. This language is taken directly from the Duluth City Charter. Word for word. The general consensus is that if the mayor becomes the executive of the chief executive officer, that he will have the authority to discuss these matters with the council and direct his staff and the department heads appropriately about how to handle council inquiries and communications. It's redundant and it's potentially a little inflammatory. Commissioner Ginder, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I guess two parts to my comments here. One is I am in favor of removing this section as it is. I anticipate that I will probably bring a substitute, not today, I don't have it prepared yet, that would differentiate the jurisdiction of both the mayor and the city council. I would note that almost every strong mayor system that we've looked at has some kind of language to this effect. I agree with both the mayor and the city council that we don't need the misdemeanors. The Duluth one is probably the strongest of any of the charters that we have looked at. But there is language that outlines the separation of the powers that provides for the legislative function, the city council, to contact with staff members in pursuance of their legislative and policymaking function. And it kind of clarifies that they still have this access, and it is not dependent upon the mayor's permission to do that. So that's my comment. I'll be voting in favor of removing this section, but I will be bringing at a later time an amendment to add something else back in.
Okay, thank you. Chair Clegg, you've got your hand up.
I would just thank Commissioner Ginder, and I look forward to his substitute language. I'm certainly not opposed to careful language that defines the roles of the legislative and executive branches. I just don't think this is the right language.
Commissioner Metke, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I agree with Commissioner Ginder, and I look forward to the language that he'll be bringing. And I do think something does need to be in the charter, but I will be voting to remove it as it stands today as well.
Very good, thank you. Commissioner Smith, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I guess I concur on the other comments that were made. I guess in response to Commissioner Ginder, I guess I would like to see his proposed language. I guess I would just note that I would specifically like to not have a provision that refers to something as a misdemeanor or a conviction or removal from office. I guess I have some doubts as to whether a charter can even do that. It makes it almost sound like it's criminal. And so I guess I'd like to see that language removed. But I think maybe having something that distinguishes between the powers is a good idea.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on the motion by Chair Clegg to remove 7.1.H.1, the prime directive? Seeing no additional conversation or discussion, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on whether to adopt the motion by Chair Clegg.
Commissioner Ginder,
Aye.
Commissioner Metke,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commission Chair Clegg,
Aye.
Co-Chair Garcia,
Aye.
Co-Chair Abbott.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
The motion has passed, and the language in section 7.1 H1 has been deleted. I think for our drafter, Mr. Melendez, I don't know if that leaves H2 hanging or if we need to just move it up a level, but I'll leave that to the draftsmanship of our drafter. Are there any other motions at the moment? Commissioner Clegg?
I don't have a motion, but I would encourage committee members and commissioners, if they have questions about particular wording or think that there should be an extra comma or should not be an extra comma or something should be moved, now is the time to raise it.
Okay. Let me make a motion, and this may be a motion that we probably have to put off because I'm not sure I can submit the exact text today, but I think this is, and as long as we have Mr. Melendez here, I'm curious as to his thoughts about the comparative language. But the existing proposal in section 7.1A says Chief Executive. The Chief Executive Officer is the mayor. And I would propose that we delete that language and replace it with the following. The general executive and administrative authority of the city of Minneapolis resides in the mayor, who acts as the city's chief executive officer.
I won't go much longer.
And I guess as a motion, is there a second to that motion? Or perhaps we could just kind of table that for a later meeting.
Could you repeat what your suggested change was again?
Yes. It's designed to do the same thing, I think, just to make it clearer. And the language I'm proposing is as follows. The general executive and administrative authority of the city of Minneapolis resides in the mayor, comma, who acts as the city's chief executive officer. And the reason I have done this is it parallels the grant of authority to the council in section 4.1. I thought that we should, I think we should treat the co-equal branches co-equally in the language. And I think that just makes it clear that the mayor is the head of the executive side, as opposed to the, I mean, I realize it's splitting hairs, but I'm a lawyer and this is a charter and we tend to split hairs here. Maybe I could ask Commissioner or former Commissioner Melendez if there was a reason that he phrased the original proposal the way he did, and what his reaction might be to changing that. Commissioner Melendez, are you there? Or former Commissioner Melendez, are you there?
Mr. Chair, I think he may have been booted out of the meeting. I don't see him in the list right now.
Okay, well, we'll come back to him. In the meantime,
I will also share with you, Mr. Chair, that I posted your language in the chat for reference, in case anybody wants to see the language.
Thank you. Commissioner Rubenstein, you have your hand up. And you need to unmute.
Thank you. I had an unrelated question. If we're still on this provision, I can wait.
Okay, we'll come back to you when we're done with this.
Okay, thank you.
Former Commissioner Melendez, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry, I was apparently involuntarily muted and trying to unmute, but couldn't do it in time. Mr. Chair, you had asked why that language was in there originally. I actually dug it out of a very old draft of the plain language charter revision. Obviously, this language didn't make it in to the final draft, but I just dug it out because we had talked about doing it that way at one time and ended up changing it to what is now in the charter at the instance of former council member Gary Schiff, who didn't like the notion that the mayor was the chief executive officer. As far as your proposal, I don't have any strong objection to it. I want to do a little wordsmithing with it to make it more consistent with the parallel provision in the article about the council. But I think the concept is fine.
Okay. Well, why don't
we all know that what Brian really wants to do is take out the word shall.
Well, there's that, and also of the city of Minneapolis, which you can just say cities.
Okay. Why don't we do this? Why don't I just amend my motion? We're getting some feedback somewhere here. I'm hearing myself in my headphones.
Too many open microphones, Mr. Chair.
All right, let's try it again. Let me amend my motion to take my language and refer it to Mr. Melendez and have it come back to this drafting body at a subsequent meeting, whether that's Thursday or the following Tuesday. And Commissioner Metke, you had your hand up at one point.
No, well, I was just going to say that I could still see former Commissioner Melendez and that he was muted, but that situation was taken care of.
Very good, thank you. Okay, so I have a motion to refer my language to Mr. Melendez for some wordsmithing and then have it come back to the commission. Is there a second? Second by Ms.
Clegg.
By Chair Clegg, seconded. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion to refer my language to Mr. Melendez.
Commissioner Ginder,
Aye.
Commissioner Metke,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commission Chair Clegg,
Aye.
Co-Chair Garcia,
Aye.
Co-Chair Abbott.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
The motion has passed, and we will refer that to Mr. Melendez. Commissioner Rubenstein, your hand was up now that we're past that motion.
Yes,
I think.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question about section 4.1G on the audit. And it looks like very good language to me. I don't have any objection to the language at all, but I don't recall it being anything that we've discussed before. And I just wondered how it got into this draft.
This is the 4.1G language.
Right, and it appears to be sort of maybe an embellishment of the city council function, but it's also a whole different, in a way, a different ballgame.
Chair Clegg, perhaps you can speak to that.
I was just going to say we had discussed moving the audit function over to the council specifically, as opposed to leaving it as a department that would be treated as all other departments. In most legislative council systems, the council retains legislative and oversight authority. And usually that means responsibility not only for the clerk, but also for the auditor. And I think this specific language was crafted with the assistance of Commissioner Ginder, who was in essence cross-referencing it to the current ordinance on the auditor's role.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other, I'm hearing myself again. Is there any other discussion at the moment? Chair Clegg, your hand is still up. Oh, it just went down. So I have one other proposed change that I think we should refer to Mr. Melendez. I would like to, the language in, I am really getting some bad feedback. I can't, can we get, and I'm also having some odd issues with my Teams software here. So, all right. What I was going to suggest is, oh, there we go, much better. So, Commissioner Co-Chair Garcia, you've got your hand up.
Yes, however, I believe that Commissioner Smith's hand was up before mine.
Yes, Commissioner Smith, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question about another section, and I think it's 4.4A3D. It says there's an absolute majority required for certain actions, and it talks about adopting an ordinance, A, appropriating money, and I guess it'd be C, authorize improvements to a sidewalk subject to a special assessment. And I guess it just seems kind of like a very odd thing to me compared to the ordinance and the appropriating money. And I guess I'm wondering, is that provision really necessary in the charter?
Commissioner Clegg, Chair Clegg, do you want to take a shot at that?
Thank you. I would just say I agree completely. It doesn't need to be in the charter, but it is. And I think our goal in this amendment is to keep it simple, keep it limited to one subject. There's probably lots of other changes we could make that make sense, but this, I would submit anyway, that this one is for another amendment down the road.
Okay, thank you. I'm having some interesting issues with the Teams software. It's like the screen has taken over, the screen has taken over my entire monitor, and I can no longer see the group or who's raised their hands, and I can't even seem to add, I need to add something to the chat here for a proposal I want to make, but I can't I can't scroll down to get to the text box to paste in my text. So this is really quite a new thing. What I would suggest, frankly, is that I log out and log back in. Can I ask Co-Chair Garcia to take over for a few minutes while I get out and get back in? Would that be acceptable?
Of course.
Thank you, Jill. Let me get out and I'll be back in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Okay. I will now, as chairing, I will put myself at the end of the speaking queue. So, Commissioner Smith, you had your opportunity to ask your question or make your comments?
Yes, I did.
Okay, just wanted to make sure we're leaving off in the right place. Commissioner Ginder?
Excuse me, Commissioner Clegg, or Chair Clegg, basically took my response forward with his response to Commissioner Smith.
Okay. And Chair Clegg, did you have anything to add?
Sorry, extraneous hand now being taken down.
Boy. Well, then putting myself back in the queue, so to speak, regarding the question or the paragraph under 4.1 that Commissioner Rubenstein had just brought up. I have some suggested language, but what I would like to do is suggest that we put in there a description of the function of the city auditor and make that section, instead of just audit, make it city auditor, and then have the function of the city auditor be more broad than what is currently in paragraph G, but ensure that what is encompassed in paragraph G is definitely taken into account into the more broad description. And I can get that language. I can put it in the chat now, but I can also see if we can get that accommodated within the next draft. And I would be more than happy to work with Commissioner Ginder to ensure that the integrity of his audit committee in that audit paragraph can be retained or maintained, at least the spirit of what is described there within a broader city auditor paragraph. Commissioner Abbott, are you able to?
Yes, I'm back. I'm still having these screen difficulties, but I think I can function now. I think Ms. Bashoon had her hand up.
Yes, thank you. I just had a couple comments that I wanted you to consider. And maybe Commissioner Ginder could speak to some of these things. It does state for the auditor that the auditor has jurisdiction over the city council and over each board, commission, committee, department, officer, and other agency or agent. In the audit ordinances, it talks more so about the city departments, boards, and commissions. I'm not sure. I was just looking at it now. I didn't realize it was from the ordinances. I didn't see that language. I saw the same language with the Civil Rights Commission, where the Civil Rights Commission has the authority to work with those departments, committees, officers, agencies, and agents. But it's not clear that this is only the city boards and commissions. So that would be one thing that I would comment on. I mean, does it include the Charter Commission? So I just wanted to bring that up. And I had one other issue. The ordinance also says that the auditor does serve at the committee's pleasure, but then it does say that they need a majority vote to remove the auditor. And that is missing in here, and maybe that was because it's too detailed. So those are the two issues I had.
Does somebody want to, Chair Clegg, does somebody want to adopt?
I can respond or give some information from Ms. Bashoon, Mr. Chair, if that's all right.
That'd be great.
I think the point that you brought up, Ms. Bashoon, about the extra city agencies is something to look at. This is a kind of a joint draft proposal with Commissioner Clegg as well as the former Commissioner Melendez, and it might be something to take a look at again. It's slightly broader than what is in the ordinance. What I was attempting to do is kind of track the ordinance and maintain the independence of the committee and the function, even though it's directly underneath the city council's control. And what we're trying to clarify is, though it's under the city council's control, it retains some independence and it can investigate city council expenditures as well as any other expenditures from any city department or agency. And it may have gotten a little overbroad in that, but I'll take a look at that and thank you for bringing that up.
Okay. And the removal of the auditor, the ordinance says that there should be a majority vote. Do you think that's not needed?
I think my belief is that that will be covered in the new ordinance that will probably implement this. because it will call for an ordinance change, and so that's where I would defer that kind of detail to.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other discussion on the auditor provision? Should we make a motion to refer that to Commissioner?
Mr.
I'm sorry.
Chair.
Go ahead. Co-Chair Garcia, you had your hand up?
Oh, Commissioner Abbott, I was just going to say that as you were getting reacclimated with Teams, I made a suggestion about replacing paragraph G, where it says audit, with a paragraph entitled City Auditor with some more description of the role of a city, and with the intent to represent the spirit and capture the role that is provided for in the committee in the current draft under audit. And I put suggested language in the chat, but that is something that I'm happy to work with the drafters and also work with Commissioner Ginder to ensure that his intent, the integrity of his intent remains. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Casey, you had, Mr. Carl, excuse me, had a your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and it was probably no surprise to members. I spoke with the existing auditor who is on staff today, Ryan Patrick, a real human being who holds that job, and showed him this draft proposal for the first time. He had lots of feedback and lots of comments about what would be required to maintain independence in according with established industry standards and requirements, and other inputs that I think would be helpful to this body in terms of this specific provision. So it might be good to put all of these proposals around audit together and hear from the auditor his input, and have that come back in a more holistic fashion, which benefits from the auditor's analysis and recommendations as well. I know he is eager to provide that to the body.
Okay. I think Chair Clegg had his hand up.
Yes, thank you. I was just going to move that we then table that pending the input to be received from Commissioner Ginder, from former Commissioner Melendez, and from the city auditor.
Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to table pending a review per the motion. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll have the clerk call the roll on the motion to table pending further analysis.
Commissioner Ginder,
Aye.
Commissioner Metke,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commission Chair Clegg,
Aye.
Co-Chair Garcia,
Aye.
Co-Chair Abbott.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
The motion is passed, and that's been tabled pending a review per the motion. I would revisit, I have a proposal on 4.1H that I put into the chat that I can finally, I'm still having issues with Teams, by the way. It's expanded to my entire screen, and I can't see whose hand has been raised except occasionally. So if somebody needs to butt in, let me know. But it's interesting. Technology, can't live with it, can't live without it. But anyway, the existing proposal has, I believe it's, let's see here. 4.1H is a paragraph labeled resources. And I propose to delete the text of that and replace it with the text that I've included in the chat. And the chat language, I'll just read it out loud for those of you who don't have Teams chat available. My proposed substitute language is council, staff, and resources, period. The council may provide for staff and other resources in an amount it deems appropriate to support its collective legislative and policymaking functions, semicolon, provided that any staff or resources provided shall be hired on a nonpartisan basis as part of the classified service, semicolon, and that any such staff or resources shall support the council as a whole and cannot be assigned or designated for the use of any individual council member, period. And I think the motion would be to refer this to Mr. Melendez for his wordsmithing to see perhaps if we could get it in a better format before we bring it back for a vote at the drafting committee. Is there a second for that motion?
Second, Clegg.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion?
This is Commissioner Smith. I have a question. You say that city staff cannot be assigned or designated for the use of any individual council member. So right now, my understanding is that council members, do they each have 2 people that are on their staff? So they wouldn't have an individual person on their staff. They would work for all council members, or I guess I'm not sure how or what your proposal means exactly.
Well, my understanding is that the individual council staff is provided through a different mechanism that some involves state statutes, and this provision wouldn't affect that at all. This would be a separate. This would not replace that provision or interfere with it. This would just be a separate mechanism for them to staff themselves for their function. Chair Clegg, you had your hand up.
I was going to agree with you, Chair Abbott. I think we may want to make it clear that this applies to supplemental policymaking staff, not the 2 aides that each ward council member already has. I think that everyone thought that the previous language was vague and could be interpreted to mean that every council member could add additional staff just reporting to them. And that was not our intent. So I think this goes a ways to clearing that up and support the referral.
Any other comments or discussion? Hearing, Commissioner Ginder, your hand's up. Go ahead.
As we move forward on this particular item, I think it's also important to note that the council has its authority right now to add staff as it deems necessary for its function. So one can argue that this might not be necessary at all because they do have this ability to hire additional staff through the budget process if they so desire. So it's something that I'm still a little bit undecided on, but it's a point I think we need to remember.
Okay, very good. I think that's something we could revisit when this comes back from the wordsmithing process. Anything, any other discussion? Co-Chair Garcia, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Abbott. As part of the wordsmithing process, I agree with Commissioner Clegg that perhaps we should say supplemental staff, collective supplemental staff to support its legislative and policy-making functions. I would also like to propose that we think about saying that the clerk's office would furnish such supplemental staff. The city clerk right now, as I understand, supports the city council, period, but also supports the city council in its current legislative function, and perhaps some of this supplemental collective legislative and policy making function can come forward from the city clerk, from the city clerk's office, over which the city council has oversight.
Okay. I think somebody else had their hand up and I can't tell based on the way my screen is displayed. Does somebody else have their hand up?
I don't think so, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on the motion to refer my proposed language for evaluation? Seeing no further discussion, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion.
Commissioner Ginder,
Aye.
Commissioner Metke,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commission Chair Clegg,
Aye.
Co-Chair Garcia,
Aye.
and Co-Chair Abbott.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
And the motion is passed. That's everything on my list. Does anybody else have any proposed language or anything else we need to talk about or potentially refer to our drafter about? All right, hearing no further discussion, I think we have completed for this meeting, we've completed our discussion about government structure amendment language. And having completed the agenda, I believe we've completed the meeting, and without objection, I think we should adjourn at this point. Hearing no objection, the meeting stands adjourned.
Thank you, and thanks to former Commissioner Melendez for joining us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, former Commissioner Melendez.
And thanks to everybody putting up with my really utterly bizarre software problem here. I cannot minimize this. I mean, I can minimize the screen, but I can't scroll inside of the screen. I can't change the display. It's like I'm going to have to completely reboot. I think I'm going to reboot the whole computer and start over for Thursday and see what happens. So I have no idea what's going on.
Say, Commissioner Abbott, this is Ted. Can you send me an email that has some of what you're seeing today and experiencing, so then I can bring it up at our tech meeting?
Sure, I can give you a screenshot of what I got in front of me right now.
Yeah, exactly right. That'll work too. Thanks a lot.
All right. All right. Any post-meeting discussion at all that we need to have? I don't think so. I guess we'll see you. We're set to go on Thursday again. Is that correct?
Correct. Our next session is